All right. Maybe ready to actually get something accomplished today.
Classroom meetings do we have?
Let's see. We will not meet next week because it's Thanksgiving, and then we have 2 more weeks after that. I'm thinking, you know, it's up to y'all, but I'm thinking about doing them online so that nobody has to get up early in the morning and come up here. If y'all are okay with that, that way you don't break any more garage doors. I don't want to be the reason that you ruin your house. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make light of it. I know how irritating it is to do that sort of thing.
I'm just nervous because I wasn't able to like call right when it happened because
Yeah.
the office isn't open yet. So I like don't know what they're gonna say. And I don't know if I should be like, I don't know what happened.
There's our little child.
I like that for my wife.
Did you?
She loves it.
We got one. Hi. We got one for his mom too. Besides, we got actually I bought 3 right after they were available. I got one for us, one for his mother, and one for one of our friends that used to hang out with us all the time before the Great Plague.
Yeah, she didn't know that I got it for her.
Oh, really?
On the counter, right there as she walked in the door, and it sensed her presence, and then it just like started mocking her, and she freaking lost her mind.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it was awesome. I like it when he uses the force.
Yeah. Oh, you got one of the ones that actually does stuff. That actually says stuff. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, ours is just one of the very first ones that doesn't do any of that fancy stuff.
Yeah, he clicked his head, he talks to you. He just kind of coos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever the Yoda language is. Or Yoda species language is, excuse me.
Is his name Grogu?
Grogu, yeah. All right, let's see now. Oh, yeah. I gotta make myself a co-host. All right. Okay. So today we will do our best to get into the Republic a little more, and also, you know, see about what makes the most sense. What, you know, if people have questions about things or whatever. So we're doing the Republic for the rest of the semester because, like I said last week, it's a highly in the video, the video meeting we had. It's a highly important text in the history of Western politics, but also in the history of Western religion. I got into the TriPartite Soul and talked with y'all a little bit about what Socrates was doing with the people he was talking to, why it mattered, and stuff like that. So one of the other things I'm going to do today too is I'll kind of look at the text from time to time, which is always good. Let me get back over the modules. Open that up so that we have it. There we go. So, you know, y'all can get a copy of the text as an iBook, a Kindle book, or just, you know, read it online. If you read it online, it actually comes with these liner notes. they're on the side. So that's actually kind of helpful. It tells you who's talking, tells you what they're talking about, or what these sentences are about. This is actually a really good way to just go through and read the text really quickly, right? Just read the liner notes online and then go back and read it however you want to read it. Because if you read the liner notes, you got an outline in your head. And this actually used to be the way that everything was done a long time ago, is that everything that was published had little liner notes that academics had written in there so that people could see the gist of what was going on in case it was a little difficult, right? All right, so what do I want to talk about to get going? Well, I want to remind us, I guess, that this is a text about justice. But as I said last week, the word that's doing the work here is dikaiosune. It's the Greek word, and that actually means to gather justly, not justice. So the actual Greek word for justice is dike. So you can see, if you look at the word, you can see that it's obviously related to it, right? And the zune here is the word that means together, right? So symphony and synchronicity, right? That's the same prefix, right? And it's related to the Latin prefix like com, compassion, to have passion with, or passion together with someone, or congress, which actually means to move together, though we know that's not actually the way it works. Right, the con and the com in Latin, syn, sym in Greek. Okay, well, that's probably not really necessary, but it's difficult for me not to give etymological lessons. So dikazune actually means together justly. So if you actually think about the text, it's really cool because in one sense, it's just a gathering. It's just a gathering about gathering justly. If you wanted to play with the word a little bit, right? It's just a gathering about gathering justly. That's what they're talking about. How does a community, but remember, of course, this is actually the soul, but how does a community become a just community, a just coming together, right? So the biggest issue that's at play here is probably this word, which could also be translated this way, righteous. So obviously you can use the word just in two ways in English, right? You can say a just decision, or you can say just a decision, just a choice, right? So merely, but we're not talking about it in that sense. We're talking about it in the sense, not of merely this, but in the sense of what's right, or how the right can be found. Yeah. And when you think about it in that way, it kind of should remind you of some of the stuff that we did with the Tao Te Ching, right? Which is you start off on the way, but then you start to lose your way. So, but you have virtue, but then virtue itself begins to degrade. Well, that's okay. You have benevolence or goodwill, and right, and that that also degrades, and you don't have that. And now all you have is righteousness or justice. And the thing about righteousness and justice is, remember, where benevolence or goodwill doesn't brag. It does, and doesn't even say anything that it did it. Does the right thing, doesn't go around telling you it did the right thing. Righteousness always, it's not bragging so much, but righteousness announces that it did what it did, Yeah, because in one sense, righteousness is about justification, right? So what we basically have here is that the best person is on the way, and they're so in sync with what's happening that they don't even have to think about doing the right thing, because they just do the right thing. But if they do get to a place where they have to think about doing the right thing, then they try to do the best thing, right? Excellence. Okay, but if you're in a situation where even that's become degraded, you don't really have the virtues, you don't have the excellences there at your disposal, well, hopefully you have goodwill. So let's not forget that benevolence literally just means goodwill, right? If you have goodwill, you can still do good things. But if you do things out of a goodwill, you don't talk about it. Again, notice how this is, I don't even have to think about it. This is, I have to think about it. And if I do think about it, I want to do the best I can do. If I get to the point where all I have is my goodwill, I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to let anybody know that I'm doing it. But if I do reach a point where all I have is righteousness, then I'm going to do the thing, because this justification is where correction comes from, right? The reason that righteousness is a kind of justification is that it is a correction. And there's that word again. This is the same right, rect, rex. This is the same word. Okay. So the reason that it announces itself and what it's doing is it's attempting to help you correct. Okay. But then we know that finally, if you don't even have that, then all that's left is propriety. And propriety is empty. And as soon as somebody does the wrong thing and pisses somebody off, it leads to civil war or some sort of uncivil engagement between people, right? Okay, so now that's the Taoist idea. It's actually mirrored. There's a correspondence in the Republic. Okay, in a sense, this is just a gathering about gathering justly. It's about how do you find the just person? What would the just person look like? Right? And then that means the just person is a righteous person. Okay. That doesn't mean that they're right in the sense of being correct. It means that they live in a way that they're harmonic. Okay, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is the harmonics of the just soul. Okay, now what is a harmony? Oddly enough, harmony, harmonia, comes from the same word as the Greek word for door joint. When a door joint works well, you don't hear a lot of creaking, right? And it's not off the track. But if it's off the track, the door won't close correctly. Or if the joint is messed up, something will happen. Like right here, it looks like somebody tried to break this door open, actually. It's about to come off, the joint's about to come off, the hinge. So harmonia is actually one of the words for hinge in Greek. And a harmonia of the soul is really what the Republic is about. Okay, it's about harmonizing the soul. So let's go a little deeper into looking at this notion of Plato's tripartite soul in this text. So what I did here is I found something that was online that was already kind of like, I thought really matched up well with the way that I think about it. And what you have then are the three parts of the soul are the rational part or the intellectual part, the spirited or the passionate part, the appetitive or the desirous part. Okay. This is the smallest part of the soul for Plato. This is the smallest part of the soul for Plato. This is the biggest part of the soul for Plato, the appetitive. Okay, so we have huge appetite and small reason. And the thing keeping them bound together, the hinge, is this spirited element, is this passion, right? Okay. The words, it's not really important for y'all to know these, but I would be a bad teacher if I didn't share. The words that correspond are logistikon is the word for reason. So it's where logic happens. But think about what logic is. Logic is it derives from the Greek word logos. We read, remember, Heraclitus, right? And Heraclitus told us that there are those who have heard the logos and know that it can't be explained. There are those who know about the logos and think they can explain it. And then there are those who don't even know the logos is there and they just wander through life sleepwalking, right? Actually, you have, again, right, the TriPartite Soul. Even in Heraclitus, it's there, right? Reason, spirit, or passion, appetite. Okay. And the Greek word logos means word, also study or account. So interestingly, when he divides the soul into logistikon, thymoides, and epithematikos, again, you don't have to know these words. When he divides the soul into reason, spirit, and appetite, Plato is saying reason is not just where logic happens, but that logic is the ability to account. Logic is literally the ability to name. Right? So even though reason may be the smallest part of the soul, right, it has a lot of power because the rest of the soul does not have language. You know? Now, if you look at reason in this kind of sense, as the thinking part of the soul, and remember, I think I've said this to y'all, but I might not have. I teach so many different classes, I never know who I've said these things to. So if I have said it before, I apologize. But the Greek word psyche, from which we get the word psyche, that's, you know, psychology, psyche. The Greek word psyche is the word for soul, and it literally, it sounds like someone breathing. All the words for soul in Indo-European languages sound like someone breathing. In Sanskrit, Atman. In Latin, spiritus. And anima is another word for soul in Latin. And our word atmosphere is related to the Sanskrit word atman, the place of breathing, right? And then in English, we have two words, ghost and soul, and both of them are like last breaths. Ghost, soul. right? So the soul or the psyche is the life breath. It's what has life. It's what fills a living thing with life, right? Your body without a soul would just be meat, right? Which is the reason why when a friend of ours dies, or a loved one of ours dies, and we see the corpse, right? And corpse is just a fancy Latin word for body, right? But it's just a body. That's why we have a different word for it in English. That's not the body of my friend anymore. That's a corpse, right? That's not my friend. That's a corpse, because we know there's no life in it anymore, right? We still respect it because it once housed our friend, right? And then depending on your religious beliefs, you know, if you're Christian or a particular form of Judaism, or you're Muslim, you believe in a resurrection of some kind. So this body will be rejoined, right? And later today, if you want me to, I'll talk to you a little bit about how Plato's notion of the soul informs Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, because they don't actually account for the soul with this particularity. So most of the things that you actually know about the soul as you were growing up, it's taking Plato and applying him to these three Abrahamic religions. Okay. Anyway, so reason's the smallest part of the soul, but it's the most powerful in the sense that it has this ability to name, right? And at its best, it achieves to what the Greeks called Sophia, or wisdom. And really, that is the possibility of comparative restraint. Now, why do I call it comparative restraint? I call it comparative restraint because literally the Latin word for reason is ratio. So we use this word ratio, right? 3 parts gin, 1 part vermouth. I don't know how you take your martini. Right? Shaken, not stirred. And but it's the word ratio, but it also is where the word reason originally comes from, right? And it in a sense it tells us something about the function of reason, and that is that reason works by comparing and contrasting, because comparing and contrasting is how you determine this is a desk, this is a desk, that's a chair, right? This is a computer screen, this is a whatever the hell it is, this is a computer, this is a keyboard. Naming, right? How do you name? Because you can tell the difference between things, right? But here's the thing, naming is super powerful. Words are very powerful, right? So how do you restrain that power? We all know that we've said hateful things to people and then regretted it. Every one of us has done that, right? And you see the damage it does as soon as you do it. That's why you do it. And you know it'll last longer than if you hit them with a baseball bat. Well, I guess. Depends. Right? If you hit somebody, the bruise will go away, the pain will go away, it'll be forgotten as soon as the pain's gone. If you hurt someone with words, it could last a lifetime. So this is the real power of reason, if it can be restrained correctly, it can accomplish a lot of good, but unrestrained, it can become very dangerous. Okay. Then we get to the spirit. Okay. You get to the spirit, to the heart, right? Let's go back up to the thing there. There's your emotion. There's your passion. Yeah. It's what moves you. And actually, this word that is doing the work here, spirited or thymoides. Thymoides comes from the Greek word thumos, and it's actually a way of describing a horse that's really powerful and spirited. Okay. And so this is an interesting aspect too. So what he does here in the text is Plato has as reason, he compares reason to Athenians because that's how they do their politics. They have public debates, right? But then he compares spirit to the Thracians, and the Thracians are famous horsemen. And if you've looked at the first book, you know that the whole thing happens inside of a celebration that includes a horse race, right? Where the young, the spirited, are carrying torches on horseback in a race, sort of a kind of relay race. Okay. And what you get then with spirit is, how can spirit not fly off the handle? Spiritedness could be anger if it's unchecked. It could be brashness if it's unchecked. It could be envy if it's unchecked. So the spiritedness has to become trained. If it's not trained action, which is literally the definition of ethics, if it's not trained action, the spirit becomes destructive. It's the bad emotions, the emotions that flare up, you know, like a horse that gets spooked and then it does a lot of damage, right? Finally, there's this thing with the appetites or the desires, which correspond to the belly and the genitals. I didn't draw the genitals on the board, thank goodness. And this word you see here, it contains that other word inside of it, epithemeticon. Right? So this is something that actually always appears alongside a passion. So if you see, Kennedy, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite treat? Once you solve a problem and you're like, I'm going to reward myself, what's your favorite treat?
It's not that much of a treat. We're out of the cake batter syrup now, actually, so it is a very special treat. A cake batter oat milk matcha.
Okay, a cake batter oat milk matcha. All right, so your appetite is something that wants, right? It's a desire for something you don't have. It has a lot to do sometimes. You know how we'll say often, your parents might have said to you when you were growing up and you got too much food on your plate, or you got that third piece of cake at the birthday party, your eyes were bigger than your stomach. That's what we're talking about. That actually, even our desire, even though it corresponds in the system of the body, it corresponds to the belly and the genitals, our desire is a kind of way that we orient ourselves, right, for what we want. Sometimes what we want is what we need, like water. We need water, right? Sometimes what we want, we don't need, like coffee. Doesn't hurt though, unless you've done like, do what? Some people need coffee. Yes. Well, we live in this is an interesting point though, right? If once you worked in an office or a factory long enough, you can't get through the day without coffee or tea or something, right? Some people can't get through the day without Red Bulls. But the point is the caffeine, right? And the question then becomes, do you need the caffeine? Obviously not. I know you're joking. So you don't need the caffeine, except you're in conditions that push you to use the caffeine because it's the only way to get through working, right? Because actually, to just take a little aside here, did you know that human beings weren't meant to work 8 straight hours? We did not evolve to do the same fucking thing for 8 straight hours, right? Especially when it's, going around trying to get people to listen to your sales pitch. That's very frustrating. And you just do it over and over and over and over again, right? The majority of human beings evolved from ancestors who spent most of their time relaxing. And then just when they needed food, went to look for it, right? As our bands got bigger, our tribes got bigger, we needed more food, needed more area to traverse. So we started going out farther and farther and farther and wider. You actually will see in the Republic, if you end up reading the whole thing, and I know every one of you will end up reading all 10 books. So not I mean, we're only going to get through about 3, but I know that y'all will finish all 10 books. I have every faith that you will. If you get in there far enough, what you'll see is that this is the sort of thing that actually Plato talks about. He's like, why would we need military or police forces? And the only reason you would need military or police forces is that you want more than you need. So it's like the need for caffeine. Because the society wants more than it needs, it slowly but surely begins to expand, and then it has to have military and police in order to make sure it has what it quote unquote needs, but actually it's just a want, right?
It's interesting because these terms that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think on Sicily for 4 years, getting to experience the culture, they focus more on these things than America do.
Yeah.
And like they stop working in the afternoon, go home, take a nap.
Yeah.
But then they don't come out to eat dinner until like 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And then they'll go out for a walk, and they won't go to bed until like midnight.
Right.
But then they also shut down their shops for an entire month, and then they go on holidays. Yeah.
No, this is the Europeans do not suffer from our puritanical training, and you find a lot of people. I'm sure you probably think sometimes, I wished I was still in Sicily. That ability to just stop doing something. Of course, in Latin countries, almost every Latin country, there's the siesta or the afternoon thing, right? And and you don't know whether or not you're going to show up and the place is closed. Remember how Sid used to do the diner? It's like that. We had a Persian friend who lived in Italy for a long time, and he owned a little Italian restaurant. And you'd show up and it'd be like, oh, it's closed. It's not open. It's supposed to be open.
Yeah.
But you knew Sid well enough to know, well, that's just Sid, so I guess we'll go eat something somewhere else, right? It's irritating though if you're in the middle of doing shit for this work that we have, this work life we have, the one that makes us need caffeine, and you show up somewhere wanting to eat lunch, and they just decided not to open it. Like, God damn it, now I got to go somewhere else. I got to go to Subway or something and get a sandwich real quick, because by the time I get that and get where I'm going, get back to work, right? So we get really angry about that kind of thing in our culture. But that's only because the system is so integrated to make us keep moving constantly, right? And so it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But this is the way you do this, right? It's like, okay, so if you have a restrained, if you have comparative restraint, if you have trained action, right, then you can have satisfied need. So your needs are satisfied, and guess what? We need to party sometimes, and we need to take vacations, and we need to eat beautifully awesome stuff from time to time. We just don't need to do it all the time. So we do have needs. So there is actually, even Plato, who was fairly conservative, understood that humans need to have a good time, right? That is one of our needs. So this doesn't mean to say, okay, well, so long as you've got rice and oats and enough, and some eggs and water, you don't need anything else. You can survive. Some root vegetables, right? It's not live the bare, most ascetic life you can live. It's simply don't learn how to party when it's time to party, because partying is one of our needs, but it can be satisfied pretty quickly, right? Okay. So why is all of this stuff important for understanding a book that supposedly is about a politic, it supposedly is about a just society? Well, because, as I said last week, it's not actually about, it's just a gathering about gathering justly, but the gathering justly is supposed to be the gathering of the soul. How do you gather together your soul so it's harmonically balanced, right? Well, I don't know if any of y'all in here have ever seen a soul. Most probably not. Souls are so small, so hard to see. Plato is like, how would we even know what that looks like, right? So what ends up happening is they start talking about what a just person looks like. And I talked about this last week a little bit. They start talking about what a just person looks like. And then they decide, well, we can't really know what a just person looks like because you can't see a soul. But what if you had a community that was made up of only just people? Would that community made up of only just people itself not be just? So the whole idea then here is to say the community that we're going to talk about throughout the entirety of this book, after about the first 1.5 parts of the book, the community that we're talking about is going to be a just society. And in a sense, this just society is the soul writ large enough to see it. That's the whole purpose. It's a thought experiment that goes on for quite a few pages, trying to get to a place, and it reminds us about 20 times almost throughout the entire document, there will be reminders. This is about the soul. And we're talking about society so we can figure out how to train the soul. So we can figure out how to harmonize the soul. We're not talking about society so that we can make the right kind of society, because if you start trying to make the right kind of society without a person, without people who themselves are harmonically balanced, you'll never get that society anyway, right? So this whole experiment, this whole thought experiment between Socrates and these people is actually about how to harmonize the soul so that you can, in a sense, hopefully thrive, but at least survive, no matter what kind of society you find yourself in. Okay. All right. So I want to stop here for a minute and just ask y'all. Now, last week we came up with the notion that justice is fairness. And then we talked a little bit about the fact that it's fairness in the sense that everyone who practices justice has equity in society to do that, so that they can fully be a member of society, fully be engaged in it, right? Have you thought any more about the equity stuff over the week, Jim?
Yeah, a little bit, but I can't remember what I thought about, because it was like almost immediately after our class last.
Okay. That's fine. So we made a distinction between equality and equity in the sense that equality is that we're all born human. That's it, right? That's the best equality you can ask for. Then after that, everything is about how much of an investment do you have in the place that we live. And now I know that I just said that the whole thought experiment is actually supposed to be about how do we get to a harmonic balance of the soul and not about a society. But you have to, in order to get to a place where you can understand how to harmonize your own soul, you have to actually see the society you live in. And we all understand that the society we live in has a very imbalanced equity, right? There are some people who, no matter what you do or they do, those people will get richer and more powerful. And then there are some people who, no matter what you do or they do, these people will get less powerful and poor, more poor, right? Poor here could mean impoverished of power, impoverished of money, impoverished of home, right? I mean, so it can be any kind of impoverishment, any taking away, right? So equality is not the best way to think about the harmonics of the soul, because in actuality already, if Plato is right, and let's not say that he's automatically right, but if Plato is right, then we're already unequal. These parts are unequal. Reason has serious power in its ability to name, but spiritedness or passion has serious power in its ability to move us. And appetites or desires have serious power in its ability to get us to focus on something that might be bad for us or might be good for us, right? So unless these things are in proper harmonic balance, what you end up with is, see, here's the vices over here, right? So appetite is best when it's moderated, it has moderation, right? You know how to balance it. It's like, okay, yes, I could have a fifth slice of pie, but I think I'm going to stop. Maybe I should have stopped it the first slice, but I'm at least moderate enough to know not to have the fifth one, right? So you have this moderation, but when your appetites are out of control, and this person basically said that the vice was greed, and I added these others in because these are actually just other kinds of greed. So this is greed. Greed is definitely greed for what you don't have and you want to accumulate. Greed is an appetite for wealth. Gluttony is an appetite for more food than you need. Lust is an appetite for sex, right? All right. And then the spirited or passionate, it's driven by the emotion. It's related to the heart. It loves honor and victory, right? At its best, it's courageous. At its worst, it's anger and envy. Right? The rational part, the logical part, the naming part, it loves truth and wisdom. At its best, it's wisdom. At its best, it's Sophia. But at its worst, it's prideful or slothful. Right? And does anybody know what sloth actually is? What sloth is? Not the sloth, but sloth. You know what sloth is? It's not a word we use a lot anymore. Who's seen Seven?
You know, it was on TV last night.
Was it?
I had to go to bed.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at this stuff, and you're gonna agree for what it was,
Yeah.
you know, and it just immediately made me think of that movie Seven.
Yeah, I mean, it's the seven deadly sins. And so these are three of the virtues, along with justice. There's more than four virtues, but among the ancients, the virtues or the excellences, there was wisdom, there was courage, there was moderation, there was justice, there was piety or reverence, there was greatness of soul or kindness or generosity. There's all these kind of things, right? Well, for Plato, as you're reading the text, what you find is the way these things all work together, right? So that you can be moderate, you can have the courage to do what you might be scared to do, and you have the wisdom to know the difference. It's a serenity prayer as well. Right? Is that all those things working together, it's justice that allows them to work together. Justice is actually what keeps all of the virtues balanced so that they can accomplish what they're able to accomplish, right? And so when you read other thinkers from this period, they may start off talking about justice, because justice is sort of like, if you don't have justice, then you're not going to have a lot of any virtue, because justice is the way things hang together correctly. In this sense, the rational does the business of the rational, the passionate does the business of the passionate, and the appetitive does the business of the appetitive. They don't try to do each other's business. So they stay in their own lane, right? But now notice this. Some people don't see this at first, and they're surprised when I point it out. Vice is the root of the word vicious. When a person is vicious, and you say, you're a vicious bitch, get the hell out of my face, right? It's because they're showing some kind of vice. Lusting for your husband, gluttonous for, your food. They don't want to have their own thing, right? So viciousness is actually being in a state of vice.
What is sloth?
Oh, I'm sorry. Shit. Talk about ADHD in full effect. Sloth is, the Greek word is akedia. And sloth is the Anglo-Germanic version of the word. And actually what it means is no, that's not. It means spiritual laziness. It's very important to say spiritual laziness, because the reason I brought 7, sorry, I really went off track, y'all. You got to rein me in. The reason that I brought up 7 is 7 actually hides sloth. It says that sloth is the drug dealer who is always taking advantage of people and being lazy and doing all this bullshit. But actually, sloth is Brad Pitt's character. It's the one who takes all the shortcuts. Morgan Freeman tells Brad Pitt's character, you need to read Dante. You need to read Milton. You need to do all this research so you understand the 7 deadly sins and what this crazy bastard is up to. And so the first time you see Brad Pitt doing research, he's reading Cliff Notes. That's actually the sloth in the film. Actually, what the director does really well. I don't know if it's what they intended to do. I try not to listen to the directors because usually they disappoint. You realize that a great work is actually an accident. But what the director does is he says the sin of America is sloth. And the reason for that is spiritual laziness actually has two forms. One form is sleepiness. Right when you should really be engaging in what will make you spiritually sound, you fall asleep. Right when you're meditating, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to meditate. One of the first things you do is fall asleep. It's like, and actually, I would say to that, try to keep me from squirreling off into an ADHD hole. What I would say to that is the reason you fall asleep when you meditate is that you never have any fucking time to relax. And so the first time you actually attempt to focus your mind and relax, you fall asleep. And you know what I tell you as someone who practices meditation? Get some rest. That's okay at first. It's okay at first. But what you find is that as you practice, it may keep coming. When it keeps coming, right, in your prayer life, in your meditation life, that's a part of you, the dark side, trying to get you to not become better, to not become trained, right? So the sleepiness, and actually in the old days, monks, this is where this word originally gets into our language from, is Christian monks. There was a time around the middle of the day when they should have been doing their work, they should have been doing their prayers, they should have been doing their studies, and they just, y'all know, every time you probably open the homework for me, you start to fall asleep, right? It's called the noonday devil. You've been up work, it's the reason you need coffee. You've been working half the day, you've been up since 6 o'clock. It's 12 or 1 o'clock. You get a little bite to eat, and you got to get back to doing what you're supposed to do. Fall asleep. You get really tired. Okay, that's one side of it, right? Because you think, oh, spiritual laziness, that's the sleepiness, that's this noonday devil. But there's another side, and the other side is busyness. You're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. How's that the other side of it? Because if you make yourself busy enough, you'll never think about the things that matter. Right? And this is what Calvin Coolidge was right. The business of America is business. But actually, the busyness of America is busyness. The word for busyness, and the word for business in every Indo-European language means no leisure. And I've been trying to tell y'all since the beginning of the semester that you can't philosophize if you have no leisure. You can't think spiritually if you have no leisure. Right? So you have two things going on here. Spiritual laziness, and now think about how this would be related to reason, right? To rationality. You're supposed to be thinking through something, making choices, making decisions, but you let yourself fall asleep. Or you get yourself so caught up in the busyness of the things that you're doing that you don't think about it, right? So long as I'm really busy, I don't have to think about my significant other having an affair. So I don't have to name them adulterer. So long as I'm really busy, I don't have to think about the fact that my mother has cancer, so that I can name her dying, right? Or in that kind of sleepiness kind of mode, oh, I don't really want to think about the fact that my best friend right, has gone missing, and you just fall asleep. So you don't have to name them as abducted or dead or whatever they may be, right? So this would be then one of the vices of rationality, because it keeps you from doing what reason's supposed to do, name. Because it's very scary to name what might be wrong, right? Then on the other side, pride. Why would pride be a vice here? And you got to remember the Greeks actually didn't have trouble with being proud. That's actually a good portion of their culture, right? But what is this pride? It's overweening pride, undeserved pride. Look how smart I am. It's the kind of pride that makes you look down at other people, right? Intellectual superiority, right? You're my inferior. You're stupid. I'm smart. Fuck you, right? So that's the reason for that one. And remember, from what I told you the first weeks of class, wisdom, our word wisdom, means doomed to see. And that's so rationality at its most potent sees, has to see, has to look. It can't look if it's blinded by pride, and it can't look if it's blinded by sleepiness or busyness. Okay. All right.
We have up there for rational, you have love, truth, and wisdom, and then virtue, you have wisdom.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is one of those places where, okay, this love is the love of truth, and this wisdom, I thank you for pointing that out. I'll correct this before I use it again. This wisdom is actually prudence. Prudence. That should be prudence. I wish that I could just cross it out. This wisdom, there's two. If they didn't have enough words for love, they also have more than one word for wisdom. So they have intellectual wisdom, and they also have practical wisdom. So it loves truth and practical wisdom. So prudence is practical wisdom, but that leads in the direction of the cleverness or the ability to actually see the way things are, right? So the difference in the terms, just so you can, I guess I'll do it over here where it's not so hard and people can see it. The two terms are, so what you might call full wisdom. That's Sophia. And then practical wisdom. That's prudence. Oh, excuse me. That's sophrosune. So there's that together again. Right? So this practical wisdom is the wisdom that allows you to see how things go together best. Right? So this would be cleverness, and this would be prudence. Does that make sense? Thanks for pointing that out, actually, because that would be very, embarrassing to do that again. My pride would be hurt. I'm so proud of myself for doing this that I didn't even see. See, that's what happens. Your reason gets blocked by your pride. Yeah, so this would be truth. And okay, now we get to something extremely important. I mean, not that we haven't been talking about some stuff that's extremely important. News, come on, don't bust my. Yes, okay. How's truth? How do you understand truth? Can you take a picture of this for me real quick? Just so I can erase it. Yeah.
I think with truth, you have to trust.
Truth and trust definitely are related together, especially in English. Yes, very good. How do you mean that, though? Kind of unpack a little bit for us.
Well, I think that, you know, if you trust somebody enough, and it's interesting because we probably trust so many people that we don't even realize we trust them. Because,
Yeah.
you know, we believe a majority of what we hear. Somebody has certain credentials, somebody has
Mm-hmm.
a position, you know, things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Did you do it?
Okay, thanks. But as far as the absolute truth,
Yeah.
you know,
That's up for debate. Yeah. Well, you know, and Jaspers would completely agree with that statement. Truth, and you know, I'm sure you could figure out from what little bit of Jaspers you read that Jaspers is no relativist, but Jaspers believes that truth is very existentially yours, right? So what does that mean then? So on the one hand, Jim, you said truth is definitely related to trust. They obviously have something to do with each other in English. And actually, if something is truthful, right, it's trustworthy. I'll fall down a little bit. So what does that mean? Something's truthful, it's trustworthy. Yeah.
In good faith and accurate.
Yeah, in good faith. So in one instance, it's done in good faith. It has an accurate presentation. Okay, that's good. What else?
Is aligned with reality.
Yeah, I mean, that comes part of the accurate presentation, but I think alignment to the world. Let's put it that way instead of reality. Reality is a loaded term. Not that the world isn't, but you know, reality is like what's real and what's not real. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done shrooms, but the truthful and the trustworthy. So here's the word that they share a common root with. No pun intended. Have you ever seen a true oak? An oak that, have you ever seen a tree that's just so magnificently beautiful? It just stands there and the wind can't knock it down and it just flourishes and it's just this beautiful big tree with its big branches branching out. This is the idea behind truth and trust in the English language, is that it's something that's sturdy, it's something that obtains, it's something that lasts. So that's an aspect of it as well, that it's done in good faith, it's an accurate presentation of things, it's an alignment to the world, and it obtains, it lasts, it's sturdy. Now, there's a lot to disagree with in Plato, right? But through 2,400 years, it's obtained. And that might be because maybe people can use Plato to justify the way that they want to organize society. Or it could be that Plato and Socrates actually saw something that obtains across cultures, across time. Right? Were you fixing to say something? Okay. Like this. This is true because it's always been the case.
I was trying to figure out what.
Oh, you thought they were like, I did write them really sloppily.
I was like,
There we go. Yeah, 2 plus 2 is 4. Or 2 plus 2 equals 4. This has, right, which also equals 3 plus 1, which also equals 5 minus 1. Right? And just keep going and going and going and going and going. And it will always be true. So it's just like that tree that grows, right? So what is it that the rational loves? Well, on the one hand, it loves that which obtains, that which has sturdiness. You know? On the other hand, it loves that which allows for proper arrangement. Okay. Now let's look at the spirit and the emotional. The spirited or the passionate is driven by the emotions, corresponds to the heart. It loves honor and victory. You can tell this is actually written, was originally created by Brit, because the honor is spelled with a U. It loves honor and victory. What is honor? Anybody know? I'd say that honor is something in short supply in our society most of the time. What does honor mean? I mean, you could, if you have to, you could, default to a, Japanese samurai movie or the Klingons or something and talk about societies in which honor has a bigger role in the way that we do things. But how do we mean honor usually? Is honor something? I'm getting emotional. Is honor something that you make yourself? You're just like, I deserve honor. Honor me. Is that something you do? Or is it something people give to you? Is honor something that you expect from others? Or is honor something that you just, make a claim to? I think this is really interesting because I actually don't necessarily know that the word means much to most in American society. So why do we call a judge your honor? Okay. Why do you have to respect a judge?
Well, that's their whole job.
Definitely, if you're in their courtroom, you better. Right? Because they have a lot of wide leeway, right? Okay. So actually what you respect, and this really kind of gets a little more to what honor actually means for the ancient Greeks, you respect their office, right? I mean, you would hope that the judge is a good person, and you would hope that the judge as a human being is worthy of more than just minimal respect that you should give every human, but because of their station, you would hope that they're good people, and right. But really, when you call them your honor, and when you respect them in their courtroom, you're actually respecting their office, right? And actually, in the ancient world, whether you're talking about Athens or Corinth or Rome, right? People didn't have jobs in the government, right? they held offices, and officio is actually the Latin word that relates to honor. Okay, an honor. It's an honor to become president. Right? It's an honor to be a judge. It's an office you hold, and you should hold it not just as an honor, but with honor. Meaning you understand the full weight of the position, right? So yeah, go ahead.
That makes sense now. Because I really never understood what the word honor really meant. But that's one of the core values in the Navy is honor, courage, and commitment.
Right.
And so you're talking about honor as far as being, respecting the position.
Yes.
You could say as far as what you represent in the military.
Right, exactly. So that's a really nice one because it actually shows you the spirited element is actually related in the Republic to the military class, or to the part of your body the part of you that has courage, right? So you have there already honor, courage, commitment, right? In this sense, honor means I've taken a vow to be in this office, right? So whenever you take on an office, even if it's just as a sailor, just what do you start as, an E1? I guess that makes sense. Even if you're an E1, you're now doing something very different than you were doing before you put on that uniform. And what's interesting there too is this idea of investing. So this word has come to mean to put money into, but actually it means to wear the clothes of office. So as soon as you put on a Navy uniform, and you have your dress blues as well as your regular ones, right? As soon as you put on this uniform, you are invested, right? They don't swear you in outside of your uniform, right? Do they?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they swear you in outside of your uniform?
Yeah, your civilian clothes.
Oh, but then they give you your uniform as soon as they swear you in, right? Okay, so that's the investiture, right? This is a holdover. This is like thousands of years old. They swear you in, right? Which means they've just made you say, I will act in good faith, right? And then they give you your clothes, which will be your accurate presentation of your office. And then they give you your orders, which is alignment to the world as they want it to be aligned, right? So you have this investiture thing. So the honor there is, of course, in a sense, it's your recognition that you are fulfilling a function in society that's important, right? And what happens there is you receive honor. So you take on a position of honor, and because you take on a position of honor, you receive honor, right? So it's a very interesting thing. No, you don't have honor until you're invested in it. And then once you're invested in it, you're given honor as well, treated honorably, given honors because others treat you differently. And this can be, this could be in a whole slew of different areas here, right? If this was the old days, I mean, I'm wearing a thing, but if it was the old days, I'd be wearing a particular kind of gown, which would be the honor of my office. And if you actually look at really fancy degrees, like from Harvard or from Oxford or the University of Paris, it has in there that you're entitled to all of the honors and all of the whatevers that come with having a Master of Arts from Trinity College, from having a Doctor Philosophicus from Harvard, right? Because you've been invested. You literally are invested, actually. The moment that you get your PhD, the person who oversaw your dissertation literally puts a hood over your head, invests you with the power of your office as a doctor, as a teacher. The Latin word for teacher is doctor, right? So that's the honor part. The victory part, so they want honor. Honor is kind of like what comes with taking up your position, taking up your place, right? Victory is what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be working toward victory. Now, victory, what is victory? How do we understand victory? How would we understand victory? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Celebrate? Yeah, it's a celebration of a kind, right? Why do we celebrate when we're victorious? Because we got to the end of a struggle, right? So, I mean, right now, most of the victories we know are pretty much on football fields and basketball courts. Unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of victories in the military side of things because of the way we've decided to wage the wars, right? And so, but in the terms of a victory, victory almost always comes with a celebration because it's an end of struggle. So where honor is taking on obligation and doing your obligation, victory is, in a sense, reaching a place where struggle has been overcome. So the passionate or the emotional wants to take on, right, the right thing, and then wants to end the worst struggles, come to an end. Okay. Notice now that this one is courage. Who wants to take a crack at courage? Eunice, you want to take a crack at courage? You don't want to take a crack at courage? You don't have the courage to do courage? Kennedy? Or Dob? Yeah, he's nice. I've already bored him. He's like, I've heard this so many times over 20 years. When have you shown courage? And it could be the smallest little thing, like that time that I actually scooped a spider up and took it outside, because I hate spiders, right? So
I get scared to take my dog out at night.
oh, you show courage though, because they need to go out?
Yes.
Okay. So what we can say just even from that example is that courage is knowing what you're afraid of, but going ahead and acting. And you can kind of see then how honor and victory, how taking on an obligation and following through to the end of the struggle has a lot to do with facing your fears, right? So courage isn't being fearless, because fearless people do stupid shit, right? I bet when you were in the Navy, you never would have wanted to be with a fearless person who would just, probably get you killed, right? But a courageous person is someone that knows what they're scared of, but knows that they have to act, right? Now you see that the viciousness here is anger and envy. How would anger sideline courage, do you think? I've forgotten your name. What's your name? Jenna. Jada. I'm sorry, Jada. How would you think that courage, if courage is knowing what you're scared of but acting anyway, how do you think anger would sideline that, or would be the opposite of that?
really bored, but
Uh,
maybe still do it, but angry doing it.
yeah, I mean, are you really thinking through anything when you're angry?
No.
No, you're just doing shit. You step up, throw those hands. It's like, just start going at it. The propriety thing from the Tao Te Ching, right? It's like roll the sleeves up. You just fucked up. You're ready to get right. You don't think about it. So courage is knowing what you're scared of and acting anyway. But when you're angry, you hide in other words, you act rashly. You act without, I mean, Dobbs could tell you the stories of my anger when I've lost it. But now, how would envy get in the way of that, Eunice? How would envy get in the way of knowing what you're scared of, but acting anyway?
It would kind of be like doing something that's fun.
And maybe not even, I think envy sometimes can also hide what you're scared of because you just want something so badly, right? Yeah. So envy, a lot of times, I was watching, I want to say Mouth Breathers, but no, that's not right. Big Mouth? Big Mouth. So the newest season, the 5th season of Big Mouth is dealing a lot with the kids going through, I don't know if y'all really know the show, but it's about, teens going through puberty. And it's a cartoon. And this season, they're dealing a lot with stuff like envy and how envy makes you do really hateful shit, right? Notice that love is not anywhere on this. Our word love is very plastic compared to, when I say that, I don't mean phony. I mean, it's very bendable and reshapeable compared to the Greeks. The Greeks had different words for love, 3 different words for what we would call love, right? They had love of someone in a physical sense was called eros. Huh? Oh yeah, it's got title, the loves, it desires, it cares for. I'm gonna change all of this now that I'm able to steal it and I have Jim's notes. I'm gonna go back and redo this completely. Yes, it has the things it loves. It has the ways it loves, right? The processes it loves, right? And in this sense, so eros is the Greek word for sexual desire. And philos is the Greek word for friendly love or brotherly love or fraternal love. And then agape is the Greek word for charity or care, right? When St. John in 1 John, the epistle, says that God is love, he says theos agape estin. He says God is agape. God is literally charity, right? God is giving with no attempt to get back, right? And I think this, works nicely here. So in one sense, when he talks about what their love, it's what they resonate to. What really drives them, what really gets them going. They resonate to that which obtains and that which allows for prudent organization. They resonate to taking on an obligation and ending a struggle. They resonate to, and now we're down here, to pleasure. Right? And sometimes pleasure is hidden. Person who works out in the gym all the time is going to have a lot of pain for the pleasure of having a healthier body. Right? So sometimes the pleasure pain thing should never be looked at as absolute. Right? Now that we're down here though, let's kind of take it a little farther. The appetitive makes up the largest part of you. And that's partially because You're a living, breathing, pissing, shitting, sleeping, eating, drinking animal, right? If you have an appetite for sleep, an appetite for food, an appetite for drink, an appetite for sex, an appetite for blah, 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 blah. And the better these things are, the more pleasurable they are, right? But of course, what happens if you do pleasure too much? It becomes pain, right? That fifth slice of pie or whatever. So what's moderation? How do we understand moderation? What do we mean when we say a person's a moderate? Or even we say a person's a moderator. They're in the middle. Okay, that's good. Yeah. A moderate person is a person who is not too much of this, not too much of that, right? I think nowadays we mostly call these people centrists. But like a moderate Democrat and a moderate Republican in our political structure, a moderate Democrat and a moderate Republican are very much kind of a lot alike. People say that a lot of times. It's like, I can't tell whether you're, I can't tell whether you're a liberal Republican or a moderate Democrat, or if you're a conservative Democrat or a moderate Republican, right? So moderate has to do with enough, just enough, sufficient. Moderation is not more and not less, but just the right amount. Right. So what's that got to do with the appetite? What does that have to do with appetite? Y'all are fixing to go to Thanksgiving, I suppose, most of you.
I mean, it's like to control what you're reading for cleanliness, and not that someone's to like watch it and gauge how much of something like should be.
Like, you don't want to have 5 of those a day, right? Those matcha oatmeal cupcake, whatever you call them, birthday cake things. Last week, I think both Dobbs and I had like 1 cup over the line of coffee.
The shots I ever had on shift at work is 8.
Well, you work at where you work at? Which one?
10 minutes from here, it's called Kindred.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot of espresso. Yeah, probably, made sure you were cleaned out too, I would imagine. All that oil. So to do something in moderation is to do it just enough. Not too much, not too little. Right? So you can actually see pretty quickly how these are the vices, right? They're all over the top. Greed, gluttony, and lust. They're all over the top. They have no. So in one sense, the reason that this person said, well, the vice is just greed and didn't put the other 2 in there is that those other 2 really are kind of examples. In one sense, this has been argued for 2,000 years, that the other 2 actually are examples of immoderation, that, eating too much or screwing too much, right? Or trying to take more than you need. That's just basically greed, right? Or avarice.
And some people don't mind that last category right there. They don't mind living their life like that.
No, in fact, part of the problem of having a basically having a rationality in our society where people either default their reason into sleepiness or into over busyness is that they don't have to actually deal with the fact that we're pretty much surrounded by greed, right? In all of its different aspects, right? And actually, one of the things I think is really interesting about Plato's Republic, and he was an aristocrat, and aristocrats usually don't go this route, but he was like, you know, in a society, the people in charge should have no money at all. They shouldn't even be allowed. It should be against the law for them to touch gold because it would make them unclean. Can't even touch silver. And that among the people at large, the richest person should, he literally says this, I'm not even approximating. He says the richest person among the people at large in the society should never be more than 6 times richer than the poorest person. Because once you get outside of that, now you've begun to have an immoderate imbalance, right? Sooner or later, there's going to be 10 people who have all the equity and 1 million people who have nothing, right? Equity in all of its different forms. Equity in the form of money, but also equity in the form of power in the society, right? So one of the biggest issues I think that we deal with, this now gets us into how you get the problem of both the just society and the just soul, is achieving the proper balance where reason is awake, right? Cleverly seeking to see really what's going on and naming what's happening, in conjunction with the courage to change things that need to be changed, right? And the moderation to not go overboard, okay? And this is the proper relationship, like I drew last week. It's kind of a, run around in circles. It's kind of a pyramid, right? Well, here's an interesting figure. Let's say we have agreed to own all the land. Nobody else can own land. You're the only person that can own land, right? Get the greed at the top, and then reason down on the bottom, and reason is asleep. At best, it's probably asleep or it's too busy to be doing anything else, right? The ability for envy takes over and works with the appetite. And anytime you see anything that anybody else has, you want it and you're going to take it. And this becomes more and more silent until all you have is an extremely overactive desire to an extremely overactive desire to just take and take and take and take and take. And that's when greed's overwhelmed everything, right? And envy and greed will work together to make a very unhappy person, but also a very unhappy society. And it's never the case in Plato or any of the ancients that they're saying that you shouldn't consume, that you shouldn't do things that are pleasing and that allow you to have a good time. They're just in all things moderation, right? Starts the building block, stable ground is moderation. And that can only happen when reason and passion work together, right? To struggle to teach desire to not just want whatever it can get its hands on. Okay. It's a strange thing because to me this is it's not strange. It's common. 2,500 years of people writing about this shit. They keep saying the same thing. And we keep having to go back and repeat it because the majority of societies get imbalanced in this way. Or sometimes they'll get imbalanced like this, where the love of victory, right, and an appetite for destruction totally drowns out any ability to think, right? Nazi Germany. Right. Whereas I say right now, what we mostly are what we're mostly living through most of the time is, you know, we're driven by envy. That's what advertising does, and an appetite to get more and get more and get more and get more and get more. We confuse having more with being free. And that kind of takes you back to the Frary, right? Because Frary says we confuse having with being. And having more is not the same thing as being free. It's also not the same thing really as equity, right? Having equity, being in an equitable state is not the same thing as having a lot of money or stuff like that. Okay. All right. Where are y'all at right now? What are you thinking about? Because I was going to probably call it if y'all are ready to go home, unless you have something else you want to talk about. I think I've narrated at you enough. I mean, y'all been responding, but I feel like I've kind of been narrating through a thing, and that's not really my dig. That's not really my gig. I don't like to do that. Your assignment that's due the 30, I think is it the Friday after Thanksgiving or the Friday a week after Thanksgiving? I can't remember. Is it? Okay. The thing that's due is, I may change the date so you have a little more time. You're supposed to write a flow of the argument between Socrates and the three people in the book one. And when I say a flow of the argument, I mean, what does Cephalus say justice is? How does Socrates disagree? What does Polemachus say justice is? How does Socrates disagree? What does Thrasymachus say justice is? How does Socrates disagree? Okay. Then in book two, you've got Plato's brothers, Adeimantus and Glaucon, as representations of, you know, the other parts of the soul, and Socrates is engaged with them. So there, what I want you to do is just kind of like talk about the general thing. I'm not looking for detail. Okay, I'm not looking for detail. I'm looking to see, do you get what the argument is? And if you're having trouble and you have to look at the cliff notes, look at the cliff notes. But don't look at the cliff notes until you give it a chance. All right? Don't be Brad Pitt. Try to be Morgan Freeman. Yes. I'd rather look like Brad Pitt and act like Morgan Freeman's character. But, you know, this is what I have to work with. So that's basically it, right? And if you begin to get panicky, like, oh God, I don't know if I can do this, it literally is just Cephalus said this, Socrates disagreed this way. Polemachus said this, Socrates disagreed this way. It might take you a minute to figure it out, but especially if you look at the online version of the text, not, you know, I gave you a way to download it as you know, for iBooks or download it for Kindle, but if you look at the one that's online, it still has those liner notes, and the liner notes just give you an outline. So it literally will say Cephalus says blah, and Socrates says blah, right? So that'll help. Okay. Again, don't ever panic about it. and then you're going to turn it all in at the same time. It's worth 2 exercises because it's 2 things. It's 2 chapters. Okay. And then when we come back from Thanksgiving, so we're not meeting next week. The next time we meet, y'all are the ones here. Do you want to meet online or do you want to meet in person?
I was pretty comfortable online last class.
Yeah. I mean, if I don't have to drive from Denton to here on Saturday morning, because I have to leave at 8:20 to be here to make sure that I'm here to open the door. So if y'all are okay with Jade, is that okay with you? And then if something happens and you can't make it, then obviously I'll post it like I'm posting this. But I would prefer for y'all to try to make it. I'll put up a Zoom link then to go with that, so that I'm thinking the last 2 Saturdays that we meet, we'll just do that. But what I really want to do, because all I'm trying to do is just get y'all started on the Republic. I really do. I know I'm kidding around when I say it, but I really do, really do hope that as time goes by, someday y'all will read the whole book, because it's an awesome text. But I understand if you get busy because of the society we live in and you don't. But every now and then it's a nice little text to take up and think about. I spent 3 months reading the first book over and over and over again, and 15 years ago. And I think I became a better person for it, but you know, that's me. So when we come back and we start doing our thing online, we'll start back up with a little bit of Plato just to kind of like see what we might have gotten out of it. But definitely we're going to be looking at these things on workism, because I want us to get into the busyness of American society and the greed that permeates, you know, the desire for accumulation and all that. I want us to look at a few short texts that are very accessible, because they actually were written for magazines, not for, you know, philosophy classes, but they go directly at the heart of, this is something I was talking to you about, they go directly to the heart of workism, which is that everything in America gets turned into a job. And if you don't like being a good student, you need to be a, you know, if you treat being a student like being at work. I hate that. That's the reason why I'm willing to work with y'all to figure out other ways for you to, right? If I treated you like this was a job, some people would have been fired a long time ago because you didn't turn your work in on time. But if I treat you like you're a human being in a society that privileges working over living, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to privilege living over working, so we can figure out something, right? Okay, so we're going to work on work. We're going to work on workism for the last 2 classes, just to kind of get us into a different headspace about the bullshit jobs that America ridiculously rewards, like pays people $500,000 to do these jobs, but it doesn't add anything to being human, versus the shit jobs people have to do to keep the place running, the janitors and the McDonald's workers and then these kinds of jobs like I do, where literally I'm supposed to be okay, and I'm not actually saying this out of resentment, but I'm saying this as a description, not as a resentment. I'm supposed to be okay with getting paid the little I get paid to teach, because I get the reward of knowing you'll be better. I'm helping you be better. That actually is the reason I do this. I do it because I want y'all to be better. But the point here is they underpay teachers, they underpay nurses, they underpay a whole slew of people who contribute to the health and sometimes the sanity of society. And part of their pay is simply, you just know that you're doing good. And then people who add nothing to humanity get paid $500,000, $1 million, $2 million a year to move money around and ruin the lives of people who can be replaced with machines and stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing I want us to kind of take a look at over the course of the last 2 weeks, of course. All right. If y'all have any issues that come up, trying to get caught up on anything or trying to figure out how you should do do whatever we're doing, then just get in touch with me. You got my phone number. We can have a Zoom chat. We can meet for coffee if we have to, whatever. Okay. All right. That's right. Live long and prosper. I'll see y'all. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, you too.
Yeah. I might come up with an extra credit. I don't want to turn the holiday into work, but I might come up with an extra credit for those who want it, where you describe the Thanksgiving table and how the table works. It doesn't make sense right now, but it'll make more sense when I tell you. Okay. All right. Love you guys. Have a great one.
Who is that?